6.3. Clothes. In a business setting, men wear suits suitable for unheated or poorly heated rooms in a cold, temperate climate, namely England, where the business suit originated. Because of tradition, businessmen and office workers wear woolen 2- or 3-piece suits regardless of the climate they live in, and office buildings are air-conditioned to an English climate so that workers may comfortably overdress even if the weather outside calls for t-shirts. Dress more compatibly with the weather and save money on trying to change the temperature. This is possible if you're not subject to dress code restrictions, either by working from home or working in an occupation where your attire must not conform to customer expectations or affect shareholder profits. Like with heating and cooling, clothing should follow the seasons. I wear wool suits during the winter. They're very comfortable and last a long time. 6.3.1. Fixing up a wardrobe. Wardrobes often show a history of fashion, sales, sudden inspirations, good and bad, and changing weight. It's apparently not unusual to budget for clothes as a recurrent expense just to keep up with fashion and maintain a sufficient selection of outfits. As a result, clothes are bought cheap, although sometimes extra is paid for branding, and considered disposable. However, clothes should be considered durable goods and tools to serve a purpose. This means that an item must be carefully considered. If in doubt, always postpone. It must look good, fit the body, fit the temperature, not be sticky nor restrictive. If it doesn't allow a comfortable 5-mile walk or standing around outside and inside for 1 hour while wearing it, it fails. The process of dressing for form and function is well known. Layers. The outer layer determines the form and contributes to the function. The rest of the layers are pure function. Layers allow for flexibility in activity level and inclement weather, and they trap more air in cold climates. Anyone feeling cold and wearing anything less than 3 layers, if not 4, isn't trying hard enough. The inner layer should be sweat transporting. Quick drying. This typically means technical fibers like polypropylene or similar. If you don't plan on sweating much, or if evaporative cooling is actually desired, cotton is good. The mid-layer should be sweat-absorbing and warming. The best material for this is wool. Down if it is really cold and you can keep it dry. Wool works fine wet. If you can't afford wool, you can also use fleece. Cotton will also do in a pinch. The outer layer should be water and windproof. This combination provides the most comfortable combination. Waxed cotton is probably the most durable if you plan to keep your jacket for more than a decade, since it's easier to refurbish than using water-repellent chemicals on your technical jackets. Also consider that zippers do wear out, and they're harder to replace than buttons, which anyone can replace. In sunny conditions, the clothes should be UV resistant, meaning darker and tightly woven. In warm conditions, the clothes should be loose and allow air to pass and cool. Don't ruin heat adaptation by switching on air conditioning. In cold conditions, the clothes should be tight, particularly at the sleeves and collar, much like the business suit mentioned earlier. Also consider that the radiative heating component is strong for dark colors and weak for light colors. Hence, darker winter jackets provide more heat, but also greater volatility. Instead of a growing collection of clothing, much of which is obsolete or not generally useful, what is needed is a strategy to increase the number of outfits while minimizing the number of individual items. How to build a wardrobe. To build or rebuild a wardrobe, take a piece of paper and list all your items of clothing, spreading the items out over the paper. For example, blue shirt with print, black jeans number 1, black socks number 1, red sweater, green sweater, and so on. Now create an outfit by drawing lines between the items of clothing. For example, connecting black jeans number 1 to black socks to blue shirt forms a closed geometric shape, a triangle, and constitutes one outfit. It will be easier to match colors, at least for a guy like me, if you just stick to black, navy, and gray. These colors go well with each other and almost everything else. Continue this exercise, but only connect things you'd be willing to wear or are in fact wearing regularly as per your item usage list. At the end, you'll notice that some items connect to many other items. Those are the central pieces of your wardrobe. Other items, like that hideous sweater from Aunt Martha, are fairly unconnected. Yet other items have duplicates, which serve the same function. The most efficient wardrobe is the one with the largest ratio of outfits to items of clothing and will typically be based on the aforementioned base colors, though you can expand by adding a color or shade that goes well with your skin tone, eye color, hair color, and so on. Add or remove items of clothing accordingly. Now determine how many outfits you need. In our society, 6 is typically sufficient. 1 for each day of the work week and 1 for the weekend, although if you can convince your colleagues that you still wash your clothes, you can go with fewer. If following fashion is important to you, consider that the average piece of clothing lasts about 100 wash cycles. Better clothes may last 200 cycles. If washing is the primary source of failure, the amount of clothes should be balanced to wear out by the time it becomes unfashionable. This amount is determined by Lanchester's square law. For example, 10 average shirts that get washed after wearing them for a day give 1,000 washes total. They would last a little under 3 years given equal amount of wear. If shirt fashion changes faster than this, 10 shirts is too many. As clothes can take up a lot of space, you may want to reduce the size of your wardrobe to keep other things in your closet or to simply require less closet space in the first place. Making your own clothing. Clothing is now so inexpensive, at least in terms of getting dressed, that making your own isn't worthwhile other than for the satisfaction it brings. Mending and darning are still valuable skills, as is resizing. 6.3.2 Laundry. You may want to put in an external constraint that all dirty clothes should comprise a full laundry load to minimize laundry machine use and save wear, money, water, and electricity. If you use machines, figure full loads. This will likely be 2 loads, a colder one and a warmer one. If you're 2 people doing laundry together, the loads will be done twice as often, which makes it possible to get away with only owning half as many clothes. 3 people means 1/3, and so on. If you hand wash, you can get away with 1 to 3 sets of clothes, depending on your drying times. Many synthetic fabrics, such as no wrinkle, require little maintenance and dry quickly. In this case, it's possible to make do with only 1 set of clothing which dries overnight while one sleeps. This is the holy grail of wardrobe minimalism. To wash a full load of clothes by hand, put it in a sealed bucket with some water and detergent and drive it down a bumpy road. Don't forget the rinse cycle. This is done by transferring the clothes to a clean bucket on the way back. If you don't have a bumpy road available, you can use a plastic 10-gallon container and a plunger. If you don't have a plunger, attach a shovel handle to a wooden stool and twist it around. Alternatively, you can buy electric contraptions that will agitate the clothes for you. These are called washing machines and cost a few $100. They usually need to be repaired every few years. Commercial detergent is an interesting concoction of sodium carbonate, borax, and inactive ingredients, color agents, all of which are very inexpensive. Plus, advertising campaigns, management salaries, distribution systems, and so on, which comprise most of the cost. To make your own, you only need sodium carbonate, which is sold as either washing soda, check out the art supply section, or pH booster, next to the pool supplies, borax in the laundry detergent section, and grated bar soap, which you can grate yourself. Mix these in a 1:1:1 ratio. A load requires about a tablespoon of this mixture. If you want liquid detergent, simply mix with water and heat up the concoction. Notice that the liquid version may form clumps. This is not a functional problem. Just shake the container prior to use. To dry the clothes, use a clothesline. A clothesline is either a piece of string tied between 2 points or an expensive contraption available at green living outlets. If you stick with the piece of string, the clothesline will be working for you rather than the other way around. Some consider hanging clothes up to be arduous, back-breaking labor involving about 50 deep knee bends from the hamper to the line. Avoid this and the hamper by putting the clothes directly on your shoulder for big items like pants and shirts, or in your hand for small items like socks and underwear. Then walk over to the line and transfer them either from the hand or the shoulder as you walk along the line. There's no reason to bother with pegs unless the wind is blowing strongly. 6.4 Health. Think of health as wealth, the wealth that matters most. And being wealth, its usefulness lies in its ability to serve as an asset in our lives. The healthier the life, the better the life. What is health? Consider the way a child feels about his body. He can't stay still and wants to jump around, almost can't help himself. How many adults do that? Indeed, not many. Many adults act as if moving is not particularly enjoyable. Given the choice, they'd rather not move around. To them, moving is uncomfortable, exhausting, and even painful. Consider the curiosity of a child, always asking questions about this and that to learn about the world. Children express themselves creatively when given the chance. Here, too, only a few adults are creative, imaginative, lifelong learners. Those who are can't help themselves. They are mentally healthy and never bored. Learning comes easy to them. Conversely, many have little imagination left and would prefer not to think, especially if they have to change their mind or break a few conventions to be able to think about something. Consider that most parents love their children unconditionally, and thus children enjoy unlimited social support. As the child grows up, the innocence soon wears off, though. Indeed, the current psychiatric and sociological paradigm defines social health as being adjusted to the prevailing norms and culture. After all, we're all cogs in the machine, and if a cog doesn't work, the prevailing dogma is that it must be sick and broken. Why then is there so much depression and so many prescription drugs designed to make people stop caring so they can be neutrally happy? Perhaps being surrounded by madness redefines madness as normal, while making depression and other health issues a natural response to an unnatural situation. In other words, is it really healthy to be adjusted to an unhealthy culture? I say no. Instead, it makes sense to define social wealth as parallel to mental and physical health. As such, it should be measured by the strength of one's relationships to the people one chooses to associate with, one's tribe, so to speak. Health is thus a condition of well-being and an ability to appreciate life. It's not necessarily optimizing or conforming to a set of measurable quantities like life expectancy or blood pressure, nor is it removing all symptoms using drugs. Health is the presence of something positive, rather than the absence of something negative. 6.4.1 Moving. It's generally realized that fitness involves some combination of diet and exercise. The diet quantity determines how big the body will be, and the diet quality determines how healthy it'll be. The exercise quantity and quality determines its function, form, and health. To understand how this works, think of the human body as being analogous to a car, with the exception that the human body over time is able to adapt its size and shape to external demands of diet and exercise. It becomes what it does. It is what it has done. In other words, by looking at someone, it is possible to see how much and what they eat and what kind of exercise they do. Form follows function. The couch potato. Since there are many different human behaviors, human bodies come in many different shapes and sizes. A popular model now dominating 2/3 of the American market is the couch potato 500, adapted to a sedentary life and capable of processing large amounts of Twinkies while sitting and staring at a monitor for up to 16 hours a day. The problem with the couch potato 500 model is that it eventually requires prescription drugs to compensate for various system imbalances obtained from eating a diet of meat, starch, and corn syrup. Drugs which require some kind of insurance scheme to keep personal costs down. It's typically in pain, being overloaded with weight, meaning more drugs and typically less activity, thus exacerbating the problem further. It then requires auxiliary motorized assistance to move farther than a few city blocks, something which is almost exclusively possible with personal car ownership. The runner. Many then realize the importance of keeping in shape, which suggests a specific body shape with a lack of fat in the wrong places like thighs, hips, stomach, and upper arms, and muscle in the right places. For some strange reason I have yet to uncover, this often means putting on running shoes and going for a jog, which entails moving at a speed between 10 minutes per mile and 15 minutes per mile. Anything faster is running. Anything slower is walking. For the overweight, restricting calories will effectively reduce body size. Yet many runners and other people who do several hours of aerobic exercise each week often suffer from fat aerobics instructor syndrome, with deposits of stubborn fat in annoying places that just won't go away and even increase. The problem is that running or aerobic exercise in itself does very little for fat loss. Low-intensity exercise doesn't burn many calories. A pound of fat, that is 4,200 kilocalories, will supply enough energy for a 50-mile run, and it doesn't burn any energy after the run. In fact, it may even be detrimental. Conversely, adding a pound of muscle mass increases the daily metabolic rate by 75 to 100 kilocalories just to keep the muscle alive. It's thus clear that decreasing muscle mass is self-defeating as a strategy to fat loss. Indeed, looking at experienced runners with their relatively spindly arms and legs, with thighs no thicker than their necks, and soft and scrawny upper body, it's clear that the adaptation to long distance, anything over a couple of miles, running, doesn't get them in shape. Furthermore, no activities in real life require jogging or rhythmically jumping around. Being pursued by a dog, you sprint. If you're moving far under your own power, you either ride a bicycle or you walk. Most activities require some combination of agility, strength, and work capacity. Yet aerobics, running, or jogging enhance none of these qualities. The bodybuilder. Even though things are changing, much modern strength training has been influenced by bodybuilding. Bodybuilding is primarily concerned with developing a certain look based on bulk, symmetry, and definition. This may explain why most women stay away from any dumbbell that is not ultra-light. Usually they are color-coded pink. Although lifting heavier weights could do wonders for preventing bone loss, a solution currently sold in pill form, and increasing everyday capabilities. Since manly bulk is currently fashionable, guys have no such concerns, and therefore a lot of work goes toward increasing muscle tissue primarily on the biceps, chest, and quadriceps to manipulate the body into a certain look. In itself, the biceps are fairly useless muscles which mainly act as support to hold the elbow joint together when pulling a heavy load. In the past, a large bicep thus suggested that the functional muscles of the back and torso, which aren't immediately apparent when seen from the front, were really strong. Similarly, large pectorals suggested very strong triceps and shoulders. That is, the visibility of muscles under the skin, usually achieved through a combination of diet and exercise before a contest or a photo shoot, suggests that muscles are larger than they actually are. Because isolating muscles results in stabilizer muscles remaining underworked and limits the weight that can be lifted without sitting down or exerting effort in a particular direction, much bodybuilding work is directed towards the illusion of real strength and not as much real-world strength as the look suggests. This is similar to how driving a luxury car these days mostly means being able to put one's mark on a lease or a car loan, whereas it used to indicate a measure of wealth, since only the really wealthy would be able to pay cash for a luxury vehicle. Functional fitness. Functional fitness is a recent drive to reintegrate the isolation exercises of regular strength training and instead focus on whole-body movements. It doesn't seek to build the body for appearance, but for function. It's perhaps the first step towards moving exercise out of the gym and reintegrating body movement with everyday life. For now, it still resides in gyms, most likely because it has become difficult to find enough exercise outside in the real world, where everything that previously required physical work has been replaced with internal combustion engines, electric tools and appliances, and paper-pushing jobs to buy them. The gym, however, is a good place to start before venturing out in the real world and doing real things. It's a place of physiological preparation, where real-world strength is built up using movements which are similar in form, strength, intensity, and work capacity to real-world movements. For instance, the clean and jerk corresponds to picking up an unconscious person, the vertical row corresponds to pulling a rope, the squat corresponds to picking up a child, and the power clean corresponds to stacking sacks of corn. With a solid foundation in functional fitness, activities like cycling, walking, running, double digging a garden, or doing laundry with a plunger will be quite easy in comparison. It'll be the equivalent of driving a powerful SUV, tow package, hybrid, and all that. Being in the right shape means an enhanced ability to tolerate cold, since it depends on static muscularity and dynamic work capacity. A high work capacity is the ability to perform physical work as fast as possible. Similarly, the ability to tolerate heat depends on a low body fat percentage. If you never experience heat, you can carry more body fat. However, it's easier not to carry it and simply add a layer of clothes. The proper physical conditioning is thus aligned with the problem of heating and cooling. It's possible never to be out of breath walking upstairs or otherwise engaging in normal activities like cycling 10 miles to work or carrying a heavy package. It's possible never to be sore after an activity. It's possible to have fun engaging in strenuous physical activities into your 60s or beyond. The reason that people get weak is not age, it's a history of disuse, a process many start right out of college. I think that maintaining this functionality into old age will make life enjoyable for a long time. I noticed that my 80-year-old grandmother, who grew up on a farm, until recently was stronger than my mother, who was a stay-at-home mom, and is yet still stronger than my wife, who writes reports most of the day. This is despite the approximately 25-year age differences between them. But it parallels the progression of my grandmother using her hands and a balloon whip, and my mother using her hands and an electric mixer, while we use a bread-making machine. This trend is best reversed. High-intensity interval training. There is an absolute standard of fitness. To be fit is to be able to drag or carry an unconscious adult out of a burning house on 1, maybe 2 gulps of air. Alternatively, it's to outsprint a dog, given a head start, and climb over a 7-foot wall. To be fit is to be able to fight and defeat anyone who can outrun you and outrun anyone you can't defeat. The most effective way to reach that particular kind of fitness is high-intensity interval training. And the best way I can think of that won't cost an arm and a leg in equipment or gym fees is the clean and push press. It is a full-body movement which strengthens practically the entire body from the neck to the knees. The clean and push press works practically all the muscles in your body, and it's a great power movement. If your desire is to be strong, but with less endurance, the ultimate exercise is the deadlift. If done with dumbbells or kettlebells, these are relatively simple movements. If done with a barbell, you may want to get someone to show you. I prefer kettlebells. Do-it-yourselfers may realize the same benefits by filling a sturdy duffel bag with sandbags made out of duct-taped Ziploc bags. A high work capacity is physically equivalent to sustaining a high power output, like keeping a light bulb lit on a rowing machine, which means being able to do a lot of work in a short time. For example, stacking sacks of corn. Since this is very exhausting, training is done in intervals. The optimal interval for strength and endurance is the Tabata interval, which means 20 seconds of all-out exercise followed by 10 seconds of rest, and repeating this sequence throughout the entire workout. That is, working roughly 2/3 of the time. Increasing the weight and rest-to-work ratio prioritizes strength. Decreasing the weight and rest-to-work ratio prioritizes endurance. Pure endurance aims for working 100% of the time. To increase work capacity, a good progression is first to increase strength, then to increase volume, and then finally to increase power by shortening the rest intervals. It works like this. 1. Increase strength sufficiently to do a few reps. This is efficiently done by using this entire program at a lower strength requirement at first. 2. Build up the volume. Suppose the entire volume is 100 repetitions. In this case, do 100 reps with enough rest in between to finish. You may take all day if you like. For example, doing 5 reps every hour all day until you reach 100. Once you can do this every other day without overtraining, move to the next step. 3. Unless you picked a completely unrealistic strength level, most people will start at this point. Now, your 100 reps can be divided into sets. For example, 1 set of 100 reps, 2 sets of 50 reps, 3 sets of 33 reps, 4 sets of 25 reps, 5 sets of 20 reps, 6 sets of 18 reps, 7 sets of 14 reps, and so on. Doing 1 set should take exactly 1 minute, rest included. Use a watch. Hence, 33 sets of 3 reps will take 33 minutes to complete. The program adjusts with power capacity. For example, once 18 sets of 6 reps each can be completed in good form, move on to 14 sets of 7 reps. Once you reach 7 sets of 14 reps, say, rest periods will be very short and you will be close to being able to do the exercise continuously. For example, as a power endurance exercise. At this point, move to a higher strength level and start over. This is a very generalized way of laying out a program, and it can be used for any kind of exercise, such as push-ups, squats, power cleans, rowing, sprinting, and so on. The good thing about it is that it adjusts. You will probably find yourself making great strides in the first month, particularly if you're untrained, as neuromuscular connections adapt. After that, progression will be much slower. Also note that at the more advanced stages, the entire workout will take less than 10 minutes, yet the volume will be as high as what regular people spend an hour in the gym completing. Intensity levels. The following is a useful gauge for subjective exercise intensity. Intense exercise happens beyond level 7. I've been to level 10 twice in my life. On second thought, maybe it was only level 9. While the levels seem unscientific, they actually correlate rather well with the amount of surplus oxygen you can use to talk with. Level 1. You can hold a continuous tone. Level 2. You can tell your life story. Level 3. You can speak in paragraphs. Level 4. You can carry on a conversation. Level 5. You can talk in sentences. Level 6. You can speak a few words at a time. Level 7. You can pronounce a syllable or two at a time. Level 8. You can't possibly breathe any faster than this. Level 9, you think you will die. Level 10, you wish you were dead. The best exercise intensity in terms of calories burned and increase of cardiovascular capacity is right around the lactic acid threshold. that is, where the body starts running out of oxygen, somewhere between levels 7 and 8. Conversely, most aerobic workouts happen at level 4 because it burns the most fat relative to blood sugar, and especially because this lower level doesn't scare off the beginners, who are very important to the fitness industry. Measuring progress. To gauge progress, I use the overhead pound. This is a weight lifted or cleaned from the ground or near the ground to the shoulder, half overhead, and then getting it overhead with the arm straight. Moving a weight from shoulder to waist height in a squat is a quarter overhead. The distance covered for a deadlift is also considered a quarter overhead. A push-up is roughly the distance of half an overhead, but since the feet are supporting half the body weight, each push-up is only half of that. If you weigh 200 pounds, one push-up is thus 50 overhead pounds. You will find that, thus scaled, most compound movement work capacity tests lead to roughly the same numbers. The intensity of an overhead depends on the individual. Lifting a weight overhead requires more work for someone who is 6'2" than for someone who is 5'6". Compared to human potential, a good measure of work capacity for a 6', 175-pound male is being able to execute 5,000 overhead pounds within 10 minutes, which is roughly equivalent to doing 115 push-ups in that time, although push-ups are a rather poor measure of overall performance. 5,000 overhead pounds will make you quite competitive for local sports events. 10,000 or more is a professional performance, and 2,500 is rather weak. Work capacity scales by body weight, so weighing 50% more means increasing expected capacity by 50%. Since male athletes are about 25% stronger than female athletes pound for pound, females can subtract 25%. Unfortunately, the current female body ideal in our culture is somewhat emaciated, and consequently women find themselves doing cardio to rid themselves of fat and muscle and working out with 5-pound dumbbells to tone what's left of the muscles. This is strictly a cosmetic preference. Functionally, if a 175-pound male is working out with 50-pound weights to be at the same level of fitness, a 125-pound female should be working out with 26-pound weights, calculated by finding 75% of 125, dividing that amount by 175, and multiplying that amount by 50. At this level, participating in physical activities won't be limited by general physical preparedness. Any limit will be sports-specific. For instance, your tendons and knees won't appreciate it if you decide to run a marathon tomorrow, but your heart, legs, and lungs will be up for the task. Similarly, if you should decide to take up a sport like tennis, martial arts, or swimming, it will only be a lack of sports-specific technique that will hold you back. You should pass any fitness test by the military, police, fire department, and so on with flying colors. 6.4.2 Eating. Why do we eat the way we do? Some eat for fuel, some eat for comfort, but I bet most adopted the eating habits of their parents, rather than making a deliberate choice. Before I discuss why I think food should be eaten for fuel with good taste as a side effect, rather than the other way around, let me start by discussing eating for comfort and tradition. A comfortable addiction. Food is eaten for comfort when it's associated with good memories or even tradition, like morning coffee, the Christmas turkey, or soup the way Mom used to make it, even if it's now made in a factory. This kind of comfort food doesn't even need to taste particularly good to people outside one's particular culture, much like religious tenets often make little sense to people who follow a different faith. However, food can also be directly addictive. For example, the amino acid tryptophan, which is found in abundance in chocolate, oats, and milk and meat products, is a precursor for the neurotransmitter serotonin, which improves mood. Normally, tryptophan competes with other complex amino acids for entry into the brain, but an increase in blood sugar, which can be accomplished with sugar, white flour, and other fast carbohydrates, decreases the blood level of all amino acids except tryptophan, leaving it without competition for entry at the blood-brain barrier. This is an excellent recipe for addiction. Chocolate chip oatmeal cookies, anyone? Here's another example. Milk protein is primarily composed of casein. Casein breaks down to casomorphin, which is an opioid, so named because of its similarity to opium. Casomorphin originates in the cow's liver, gets transferred to its bloodstream, and ends up in its milk. Casomorphin is particularly concentrated in cheese, which is a milk product from which water, whey, and lactose have been removed. This explains why cheese is very addictive. It's perhaps not surprising that the food industry spends a lot of money hawking their products. Something to keep in mind is that if a product needs advertising to tell you it is good for you, it probably isn't. I'll leave sugar addiction and various other food addictions as a research project for the listener, but this does explain why changing one's diet can be very hard. Eating like a farmer. Most animals don't have breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Why do we? The standard 3 meals a day model is very useful for anyone engaging in heavy manual labor, like farm work or early industrial work. Obviously, work can't be stopped all the time for a snack break, but it's impossible to eat enough in the morning to last for an entire day of hard work. 3 meals are thus a good compromise. Breakfast would fuel 4 hours of work, lunch would fuel another 4 hours of work, and dinner would fuel 8 hours of non-work and 8 hours of sleep, nominally. For people engaged in light manual labor, this diet is a problem, particularly if highly glycemic foods are eaten at lunch, resulting in an insulin spike that drops blood sugar levels precipitously. Not only can this make a person hungry, which is why restaurants serve high glycemic foods like bread or tortillas and then make you wait a long time to order in the hopes that you have worked up an appetite, but the high level of insulin also makes one very tired. A quick way to fix this is to quickly engage in intensive workout. For example, spend 20 minutes doing all-out high-intensity interval training. Another option is to store the excess energy around the midsection and grab a cup of coffee or one of the heavily marketed energy drinks. Eating like an athlete. Recently, a diet of 6 meals a day has gained popularity. This diet is inspired by full-time athletes, especially bodybuilders, who, in contrast to full-time workers, do have the option of taking a snack break. Using blood sugar directly from the intestines and having them refueled every other hour by a meal is easier than relying on blood sugar from the liver, which gets depleted, also known as hitting the wall or tanking, after a couple hours of hard work. As a consequence, the body will start producing insulin on a sustained basis. Insulin is required to bring the sugar into the cells where it is used. Of course, there's the problem of missing a meal. In this case, insulin levels will remain high in anticipation of sugar, and if the sugar doesn't arrive on schedule, the relatively elevated levels of insulin will drive blood sugar down and make the person very hungry. This is made worse if compounded by a workout, in which case hitting the wall comes much sooner than it otherwise would. It's very important if on this diet to eat constantly. It's a good thing, too, because digesting food actually requires a substantial amount of energy, also known as the thermic effect. Generally, less refined foods like vegetables and meats require up to 1/3 of their caloric value just to digest them. Refined foods like white flour, sugars, and fat require almost nothing. This is great news for the athlete, but bad news for regular folks who don't work out 4 to 6 hours a day in pursuit of muscle mass. In this case, one must eat very small meals and stay clear of cookies and other highly processed foods. In my opinion, this offers few benefits for a normal person, who does just fine on liver glycogen without the need to turbocharge the blood sugar by continuous fueling. Eating 6 meals a day also makes for a lot of hassle, such as keeping track of calories, planning meals, the problem of missing a meal, and the resulting hunger pangs. Eating like a warrior. Culturally speaking, we have been programmed to believe that an empty feeling in the stomach is undesirable and a full belly is good. However, throughout and before history, warriors and pre-farmers, that is hunter-gatherers, have followed a diet of eating almost nothing during the day followed by a large meal at night after the fight or hunt, as it may be. This is called the warrior diet, as developed by Ori Hofmeckler, and it prevents insulin levels from spiking more than once a day. And even better, instead of trying to plan and fit in 3 or 6 meals a day, it only requires the planning of a single meal. There is no tracking of calories, as one develops a natural feel for being full without being bloated, and if prioritizing foods with a strong thermic effect by eating those first, it is hard to eat enough to gain weight with a single meal. In terms of exertion, modern workers like managers, assistants, and desk jockeys, and modern warriors like soldiers, policemen, and firefighters have more in common with the historical warrior or hunter-gatherer than the farmer or the athlete. It would thus make sense to eat similarly. Imagine being called out to a fire just before one of the 6 small meals on the bodybuilder diet, or just after one of the 3 bigger meals on the farmer diet. Exerting yourself on full stomach is not a pleasant experience. Like switching to cold showers, changing the timing of one's meals takes a couple of weeks for the body to adapt to, especially if it's used to increasing insulin levels in anticipation of food at certain times of the day. If food is not forthcoming, the presence of insulin will drop the blood sugar below a comfortable level and cause the sensation of hunger. Being hungry is nothing particularly worrisome unless it becomes a permanent condition. Unfortunately, well-fed people are unused to this feeling, and it's therefore a serious barrier to overcome. After a couple of weeks of getting used to not eating at a particular time, the feeling will go away. If dinner is eaten at a regular time, one will still feel hungry if that meal is missed or delayed. Eating every other day, even. Freeing oneself from the timing of even the evening meal is very liberating. All meals can now be eaten at home. Even missing one meal, that is, not eating for 48 hours, becomes possible. In fact, studies show that eating every other day, even when eating several meals that day, may increase longevity in the same way that constant caloric restriction does, at least in lab mice. Caloric restriction has been shown to extend longevity in two senses. Not only does it mean more years of life, it means more healthy years, as the body shows increased resistance to cancer and other degenerative diseases. It's a subject worth studying. Eating out. Americans spend close to half of their food budget having professionals cook for them. This is the equivalent of a third of my entire budget, not just for food, for everything. The solution is to dial down restaurant visits to the point where they again become special and exciting rather than expected. For those who eat out for social reasons, instead of meeting at a restaurant, take turns meeting at each other's homes. Either take turns cooking for each other or make every gathering a potluck. If you're really enterprising, start a club with your neighbors, each taking a turn cooking. With 7 families, you only have to cook once a week. Cooking. For fuel, it's possible to eat a simple diet consisting of just a few different kinds of properly designed meals, as long as they include all the necessary macro and micronutrients. However, the general recommendation is to eat a varied diet, for the same reason people are told to buy index funds when investing, namely a lack of knowledge. By eating a wide, random selection of what is sold in the market, it's believed that all needs will be covered. What's truly necessary for proper nutrition is a certain combination of amino acids, carbohydrates, and essential fats, which can be acquired in a multitude of ways and from different ingredients. The ingredients can be combined in various ways. Recipes. It's noted that recipes also follow general principles and that it's worthwhile to learn these principles. For example, baking involves a grain product, typically flour, and a liquid, typically water or milk, as well as butter, yeast, or baking soda, combined with a sour product, butter, and a sweetener, like sugar, honey, molasses, and so on. Practically any baked product can be made out of these ingredients, and they each serve a very specific purpose in that certain types of bread, muffin, or cake will always have some of them, but not others. A little experimenting will reveal this. Just remember that flour and liquids are always needed. Anything else is optional. Similarly, combining ingredients usually requires some form of utensil or appliance, for example, a knife, a bowl, a spoon, an oven, or a burner. This means that the entire process of following specific recipes and using specific utensils and appliances to combine specific ingredients into specific meals which supply all the required nutrients builds a complex system which provides flexibility and room for optimization. Optimizing ingredients. There are plenty of different diets out there. By diet, I simply mean a particular way of eating, not necessarily with the goal of losing weight or even maintaining any kind of consistency. Diet seems to be a personal choice based on physiology and habit. I'm not going to recommend anything in particular, other than not eating too much or building towards downstream health problems from a junk diet. Given a diet, ingredients can be chosen in the following ways. Spontaneous, no recipe. Shopping list, recipes before ingredients, or staples and opportunism, ingredients before recipes. Spontaneous food shopping happens without any particular strategy. The mission is to get something to eat. Often this leads to ready-to-eat meals or ordering a pizza. This is an inefficient way to spend resources, and because it's inefficient, it's expensive. Shopping with a list is perhaps the most popular way of shopping. A meal plan is selected and a shopping list is created, based upon which ingredients are needed. Economically, this is better than spontaneous shopping because it tends to avoid the TV dinners, but it's still not optimal because it doesn't take sales into account. Missing ingredients are bought regardless of their cost. The most optimal method is to shop for ingredients and then, based on the ingredients one has available, determine a recipe. This allows one to buy food on sale, typically loss leaders. The supermarket's sales strategy thus drives what's for dinner. To make this work, it's necessary to have some staples on hand, say pasta and beans, which the loss leaders, say tomatoes, zucchini, and minced meat, can be combined with. If you pay attention, you'll notice that loss leaders are typically on rotation. Something on sale now will be on sale again in the future. Wait for it and eat whatever else is on sale in the meantime. Creating a pantry of staples works on exactly the same principles as creating a wardrobe. Here, the ingredients are to the recipes what clothes in the wardrobe are to outfits. Of course, it's possible to write out the solution, but it's likely to require more paper than the wardrobe. Another way is to use websites like supercook.com to do it. The traditional best way is to learn several recipes and notice which ingredients they have in common. If one recipe includes an ingredient that is used in only that recipe, avoid the recipe. The more it's optimized, the easier it is to manage the system, but obviously there are diminishing returns to obsessing over which recipes have the most synergy. Another way to sort through your existing ingredients, a method that also works for utensils, incidentally, is to set aside a table in your kitchen for a month and put any ingredient on the table once you're done using it rather than putting it back. After a month, anything still left in the cupboards are ingredients you practically never use. As mentioned earlier, if a brand needs advertising, it is probably because it is either difficult to tell the difference between it and another brand or because you would not otherwise want to buy the product in the first place. None of the ingredients I use seem to come with coupons, and so I don't clip coupons. I do admit that coupons offer spectacular savings, but these savings are almost exclusively concentrated in pre-processed foods. For our purposes, we only really need to shop in the grain, meat, and produce sections. Not clipping coupons saves time organizing them as well as running around to different shops to use them. A search will generally reveal one or at most two stores nearby that can supply all your needs. A systematic search may be in order. Travel all the streets of your city and visit all the stores, making a note of their prices and selection. Relying on junk mail or chain stores usually isn't the best solution. Put in some footwork. It's good exercise. Set a strict food budget item. You'll notice that your total caloric intake will fall. You'll eat less processed food, likely none at all. As a result, your general health will improve and your long-term health expenses will decline, maybe to a point where you don't need to stay employed to be able to afford your required medical care. Budget $80 per person per month for food and only shop once a week, keeping track of food costs with a notebook or by paying in cash. As novices may find it challenging to spread the budget equitably over the entire month, dividing it into a weekly budget may be helpful. Building up a store of food, thus decoupling shopping from cooking, allows one to wait for sales, and thus to spend money almost exclusively on sales. This only works with storable food groups. Here, a freezer is much better than a refrigerator, and if I could choose only one, I'd choose to have a freezer over a refrigerator, but I'd rather have neither. This may be surprising, especially considering that we tend to believe that everything needs to be refrigerated. However, the next section offers suggestions for what can be stored without the noise and electricity usage of a refrigerator or freezer. Storing also avoids having to engage in the proverbial scramble for milk, eggs, and bread whenever the weather forecast is unfavorable. Optimizing utensils. In general, simple meals are easier to cook. This means less need for unusual ingredients or utensils, less time spent preparing, and less time cleaning up. The simplest meal is the one-pot meal. You will find many ideas for one-pot meals in cookbooks focusing on slow cookers. These can be eaten directly out of the pot. Many cultures do this. A better choice than the slow cooker is the traditional slow cooking setup, the hay box. Instead of an actual hay box, put the pot under the blankets of the bed. This also heats up the bed. Alternatively, use an old sleeping bag or a cardboard box inside a bigger cardboard box with newspaper shreddings in between. The ideal pot for this is a pressure cooker because it naturally seals, but take the rubber gasket off or use an old one when in slow cooking mode to keep it from wearing out. Pressure cooking also radically cuts down on time and fuel use as well as making some dishes much easier. For instance, I have never burned any of my rice in a pressure cooker because the heat comes from the steam pressure rather than from the bottom, which it does in a conventional boil. Specific diets also influence the choice of utensils. For example, someone choosing to eat raw food only, a diet which can fulfill all dietary requirements, wouldn't need a stove, but would need a dehydrator, which is easy to build yourself, a blender, which is somewhat trickier, and probably a juicer instead. Such a person's kitchen would look quite different from the norm. Similarly, someone living close to the supermarket and not storing more than a day's worth of perishables could eliminate the need for a refrigerator. After all, the refrigerator is a recent invention. The refrigerator could also be eliminated by changing ingredients. Shopping outside the refrigerated section also means avoiding meat and dairy products. Many fruits, vegetables, and tubers store without refrigeration for weeks or even months, like potatoes, sweet potatoes, cabbage, onions, garlic, carrots, winter squash, turnips, apples, oranges, limes, and lemons. Others store for days, such as bananas, lettuce, tomatoes, green beans, and melons. Books on boat provisioning are a good source of this information, as are old cookbooks. This doesn't require a complete elimination of meat, ice cream, and so on. It just means only buying what will be eaten that day. All things being equal, not having a refrigerator will likely make one's diet healthier. Of course, not having a refrigerator doesn't mean not having a freezer. When selecting utensils, keep in mind that the modern kitchen is full of specialized junk that only serves a single function. Avoid this. For example, instead of putting your spoon or ladle on a spoon rest, put it on a plate. Instead of cooking rice and eggs in dedicated rice and egg cookers, use a pot. Instead of toasting bread in a toaster, use a cast iron pan with a cast iron lid, which, when taken care of, will last a lifetime. Yes, it works. Commit to a single knife. For most people, this is a short chef's knife, although if you are a vegetarian, a serrated utility or tomato knife is perhaps better. I've had the same $5 tomato knife for over 14 years now. Best knife ever. Detergents, cleaners, and other household stuff. I prefer to clean appliances and utensils immediately after using them. This means that after I'm done using a cutting board or ladle, I clean it immediately. Since the food isn't dry yet, this makes it very easy to clean and saves time. I try to do the same with general maintenance. Dirt and mess tends to invite more dirt and mess, so it's best kept from establishing a foothold in the first place. Another popular method is waiting for guests to come over and then engaging in a frantic overhaul of the entire home. Most household cleaners comprise simple staple ingredients which you can mix yourself, but which are sold in fancy bottles with expensive advertising campaigns to an ignorant public for 10 times the cost. Since their basic ingredients are the same, their effectiveness is too. The staples are ammonia, baking soda, borax, chlorine, soap, and clear vinegar. Just remember to never combine chlorine and ammonia. Otherwise, learn how to put the rest together, instead of relying on companies to supply them to you with additives at a higher cost. This only requires searching the web for homemade X or DIY X every time you need X. My last search was for oven cleaner. No problem. 6.5. Transportation. Travel is the process of getting from A to B, and transportation is the means of travel. Solving the transportation problem starts by strategically minimizing the distance between A and B. Successfully minimizing this distance permits walking and cycling. Not having a car saves a lot of money, and moving around by muscle power increases fitness. Countries show an inverse correlation between obesity and miles traveled under human power. This in turn can substitute for an entire cardio program by either running or doing interval cycling on the way home. Just pick a mile marker and go all out until you hit level 8. If you plan the location of your residence relative to your work properly, it's not very far. One strategy is to think of cars as recreational vehicles, like I believe they were originally intended to be. As such, use them for tours on weekends and use your feet or your bike on weekdays, rather than the other way around. This requires a lot of discipline, so it may be better to get rid of the car outright and rent one on weekends. Comparing modes of transportation. Consider these times to reach a destination about 3 miles away. Walking, at a sustained rate of just under 4 miles an hour, 45 minutes. Running, 25 minutes. Cycling, 15 minutes. Driving, 10 minutes. One reason that the faster methods are so similar is that a surprisingly large amount of time is spent waiting for traffic lights to change, even for running. It's probably 3 to 4 minutes. In particular, cycling and driving include time preparing the vehicle and parking it again. I think one has to offer a fairly convincing argument to use a car rather than a bicycle just to save 5 minutes. Hauling is no argument because one can easily fit a heavy-duty cargo trailer to a low-geared bicycle, which, due to its open nature, can haul as much as a truck, if not more. I'm not exaggerating. You could transport a big refrigerator with a bicycle trailer. Time-wise, I can even make the argument for running and walking rather than using a bicycle, especially if it's raining, since proper maintenance requires spending 15 minutes wiping down the bike at the destination. This list comparing modes of transportation doesn't consider the time spent paying for and maintaining the cars, bikes, and shoes, respectively. Suppose we make 10 such trips weekly, 50 weeks a year. That's 500 trips a year. This will take 22,500 minutes of walking, 12,500 minutes of running, 7,500 minutes of cycling, or 5,000 minutes of driving. According to government statistics, the average person spends 20% of his income on vehicles. The average person also works 2,000 hours, or 120,000 minutes, a year. 20% of that is 24,000 minutes. A bike can be had for $50 and up, so that's about 300 minutes of work to buy it. But let's say 1,000 minutes a year. I think that's quite conservative considering how long a bicycle lasts. With daily rides, you'll have a flat every third month or so, and those will take 15 minutes to fix, so that's an hour a year. That makes it 1,060 minutes. Shoe soles are about $40 a year if walking, and twice that for running, which costs maybe 250 or 500 minutes to pay for. Adding that, we get the following numbers. 22,750 minutes for walking, 13,000 minutes for running, 8,560 minutes for cycling, and 29,000 minutes for driving. For a distance of 3 miles, the most optimal mode of transportation in terms of money time is cycling. It's interesting to note that driving a car is almost as economically efficient, if you follow the principle that time is money, as just putting your shoes on and starting to walk. It's likely that a big reason for this is that the car and oil industries are heavily subsidized. Keep in mind that this presumes you're always capable of making more money. If you're salaried, paid overtime is typically not possible. You can do a similar calculation based on the time you spend getting to your destination and the cost of your shoes, bicycle, and car, respectively. 6.5.1 Driving. The thing that most Americans live for, and which permeates the entire culture, the car, is an incredibly expensive piece of machinery, with barriers to non-ownership that must be dealt with emotionally and physically. It's likely that universal car ownership was one of the larger mistakes of American society. When few people have cars, cars mean freedom. When everybody has cars, cars mean sitting in endless lines, emitting pollution, and not having a car means freedom. Many people are in such poor shape that they can't get anywhere under their own power. This is a physical barrier to non-ownership. However, anyone can walk efficiently with practice. I still remember getting passed by several 60-plus-year-olds during a 2-day double marathon walk. I had no training, they had plenty, happily marching along, commenting on the pretty flowers, while I was dragging my 18-year-old sedentary feet along, only concentrating on the next painful step. Many believe that not having a car is unsafe, despite the fact that more people die in automobile accidents than are killed by guns every year. This is a mental barrier to car non-ownership. Next to housing cost, transportation costs are Americans' second biggest source of expenses. Car ownership has some or all of the following costs. 1. Depreciation, leasing, or debt servicing costs. Leasing or debt servicing costs are relevant if you don't own your car outright. If you own your car outright and you intend to replace it, depreciation costs become relevant. For instance, $12,000 for a car that lasts 10 years costs $100 a month. That requires $40,100 in extra savings. 2. Gasoline and insurance. These are unavoidable if you want to drive your car anywhere, except perhaps downhill on back roads. 3. Opportunity and health costs from sitting behind the wheel when you could be exercising. The average American spends 20% of his income on transportation. That is 0.2 times 12, which equals 2.4 months a year of work. That is a lot of time that could be used for something better. Assuming he also spends an hour daily in his car commuting, then that is 250 hours a year, assuming 250 working days. That is 1/8 of the working day on top of the working day, or 1/8 of the working month on top of the working month. Hence, that is 12 divided by 8, which equals an additional 1.5 working months, meaning we end up working 4 months a year driving and earning transportation funds. Hence, if it would otherwise take you 6 years of work to retire, if you own a car, you would need to subtract 4 months' worth of savings per year, so your time until retirement would extend to 9 years, calculated by subtracting 4 from 12, dividing 12 by that amount, and then multiplying the resulting number by 6, or 3 additional years simply due to driving. If you calculate 12 years until retirement, then you're really looking at 18, or 6 more years. Giving up the car makes sense. First, you'll save money on exercise. Driving your car over to a gym to run on the treadmill, then driving back again is inefficient at best. If walked or biked to and from work, not only would you save money otherwise spent on a car, you'd also save the money normally spent on a gym membership. Many people past college age completely ignore physical fitness. It seems like a degree and a career also serve as a subscription to physical decline. If you're going to retire early, it will be sad to sit on the couch all day being shut out of physical activities due to a belief that weakness comes from age. I'd consider it normal to, without preparation or prior training other than a daily commute, be able to run 5 miles, walk 25 miles, or bike 50 miles. Perhaps these numbers sound insane. This suggests a large chasm between the frame of mind of someone who gets around using gasoline and a walker, runner, or rider who gets around under his own power. Walkers easily travel 3 miles by foot. Drivers get in their cars to get from one side of the parking lot to the other. Neither quite understand why the other is so crazy when it's so easy to do things their way. Not having access to an automobile means rediscovering the art of planning. Do your shopping in fewer trips, or alternatively plan to live closer to the market. I used to shop every other day on the way home from work, which meant I could buy food with fewer preservatives and chemical additives. Interestingly enough, it seems that as long as you know someone who is going the same way, they are usually happy to offer you a ride. Don't forget to extend favors in the other direction, like offering to pay for gas. But what about the children, you ask? Surely they need to be ferried around? They need to live close enough to their school that they can ride a bike or walk or take the bus. Good habits are best started early. Consider a trailer bike. Consider walking them to school, or at least to the bus. When I was a kid, I lived 2 miles from my school, and my mom walked me back and forth for the first year. When you're free from your job, you'll have time for this. It's a meaningful thing to do. It's, in my opinion, better than working for more years so you can drive your kids back and forth in a van. Affordable driving. An enviable alternative is fixing up classic cars or motorcycles, which can make costs close to zero. This is done by buying a fixer-upper at the lower end of the price range of the depreciation curve for a given year, fixing it up, and selling it at the upper end a few years later, making the holding cost close to zero, or perhaps even positive. This way you can achieve transportation as well as income, whereas cycling and walking achieve transportation and health. Of course, you could do the smart thing and fix up bicycles. It doesn't pay as well as auto repair, but you get transportation, money, and health. 6.5.2. Walking. To a large extent, weather is all about attitude and the right clothes and shoes. I grew up in a place where it probably rains 200 days a year, and consequently I have more than a handful of different words for different types of rain. Conversely, a few raindrops in a dry area send people scrambling for cover. Similarly, 1 inch of snow in a place where it never snows sends cars careening all over the place. Getting caught in the rain is really like a bear attack. Don't run. The reason is that due to aberration, running will cause the rain to come in from the front, thus exposing a much larger area of the body. If you walk, it'll mostly come from above, and only the shoulders and the head will get wet. If it's not windy, use an umbrella. It might be unhandy or uncool, but not even the best text materials can beat an umbrella for breathability in this situation. Don't get one of those fashionably huge umbrellas. For handiness, the smaller the better. For instance, I can fit my telescopic $5 umbrella in my chest pocket. Even without an umbrella, it's possible to walk for about an hour and only get the top part of the jacket and maybe the shins of the pants wet. If it's rainy and windy, the problem becomes more difficult. The umbrella is now useless. If deployed, it'll blow out shortly. Tex shell jackets are great. I prefer the 3-layer type, which comprise a liner, a Tex barrier, and the outer shell, which is typically treated with water repellent. The 2-layer jackets are slightly lighter, slightly more expensive, and, I suspect, slightly less durable. They use a special treatment on the Tex layer so that it doesn't need to be protected by a liner. I got my jacket about 14 years ago for around $400 or $500, and it was completely worth it, being presently amortized to about $40 per year. Having an absolutely windproof and breathable jacket feels much better than an insulated nylon jacket. If the outer shell is waterproofed, it's sufficiently water-resistant to take a shower with. If it's not, water in the soaked shell will slowly diffuse around the corner, at the sleeves, and creep up on the inside. Also, the text will no longer be breathing, although it's still practically waterproof. I picked an all-black jacket because it works better for business casual than signal colors. If that is not of concern to you, I would advise offshore foul weather gear because of its superior hood and collar. 2 things to consider. First, a big hood. Check to see if it holds a bike helmet. A jacket designed for military use likely will, and preferably one that folds into the collar to retain the business casual feel. Most hoods on cheaper jackets are so small that buckling up means having the hood directly on your skin. A good hood should have the appearance of a small astronaut helmet. Large pockets are great. I can carry 1 umbrella, 2 bananas, a large pair of gloves, or a handheld 2-meter transceiver inside my pocket. It's huge. It also has a drawstring to adjust the waist and the bottom. When it rains, the bottom should be wide. If it's snug, water will just run onto the pants. The waist doesn't matter in terms of rain. Generally, if it's cold, the waist should be loose. If it's warm, it doesn't matter. Most shells will have the option for a zip-in fleece. Get a liner that fits the zipper. Often it doesn't have to be the same brand as long as it fits. Pants are much less important than one might think. Unless we're talking heavy rain under windy conditions, jeans are perfectly all right. Remember, when walking, rain comes mainly from above, therefore cheap rain pants will do. The problem here is that moisture from the inside will get your pants wet anyway. Therefore, I often prefer to wear a loose set of pants on top of my regular pants. Jogging pants work fine for this. They do get wet, but since they are loose, the water doesn't transfer to the layer below. One important point is not to tuck the pants' legs into the boots or socks. The bottom of the pants will get wet and transfer to whatever they touch. Depending on the level of flooding, hiking boots are recommended. If you're walking regularly, I'd get a pair anyway. Personally, the quality I demand doesn't cost less than $200. The cheaper ones only last a couple thousand miles before the seams start breaking. My current pair of boots are almost as old as my jacket, and I've walked many thousands of miles in them. This means an annual depreciation cost of about $20, if maintenance is expensed separately. They are full-grain leather. I don't like nubuck because it doesn't last as long and it doesn't survive long against rock, in the case of serious hiking. It goes without saying that I'd never get anything with nylon in it. My boots have a stitched Norwegian welt. Stitched welts are getting hard to find these days, since $100 glued sole boots sell better, but some companies still make them. If you get a chance to buy a pair, jump on it. Maybe buy 2 or 3 pairs so you're covered for life. Having used a lot of leather, fat, and polish, I've made mine quite water-resistant and wouldn't think twice about walking through a 2-inch deep water puddle. Find a good cobbler who will put in good replacement soles, preferably the same as the original soles or better, rather than a cheap sole that has to be replaced again in a year. This outfit should work for most situations. If you walk a lot or commute by foot, it works very well in cold or wet temperate climates. So if such a climate is in your future, start substituting into them the next time a garment or some footwear breaks down. Running as transportation. When I first came to the U.S. in 2004, someone asked me if I rode bicycles. I replied in the affirmative, and then I was asked whether I liked to ride for fun. For fun? You see, in the U.S., people mainly ride bikes recreationally, whereas in Europe, people mainly ride bikes as a form of transportation. This partially goes to show how deeply ingrained the association of certain modes of transportation are with certain activities. Further, in the U.S., walking is something you do inside the mall, and in Europe, walking is something you do to get to the bus stop. However, when it comes to running, both Europe and the U.S. are similar in that running is a recreational activity. However, for the fit person who wouldn't break a sweat from jogging a couple of miles, running could easily be a way to get from A to B, which is as simple as walking. You only need a pair of shoes, but 2 to 3 times faster. For short distances up to 3 miles, it's almost as fast as slow cycling, because it takes a few minutes on each end to get the bike out and ready. It's possible to run with small loads using a backpack. If the backpack is loaded with more than a dozen pounds, however, normal running becomes destructive to the knees. Instead, run in a gliding fashion, keeping the knees close together and always 1 foot on the ground. It would thus be possible to literally run small errands, like picking up small items from the supermarket. And anyone who does this on a regular basis is bound to end up with sustained low-intensity endurance and a resting pulse lower than 50 beats per minute. If you managed to arrange your residence to be less than 3 miles from anything, you wouldn't even need a bicycle. In that case, I would walk to work, which would take 60 minutes that could be used for meditation, brainstorming, or calculating your passive income from your savings in as many ways as you can think of, and then run home, which would take about 20 minutes. When shopping, I'd run with an empty backpack and then walk a full backpack home. It is a more minimalist approach than the bicycle option. 6.5.3. Cycling. Statistically, cycling is about as dangerous as driving a standard-sized car. SUVs are a little bit more dangerous because of rollovers and the increased difficulty of swerving out of the way in a bigger vehicle. However, many bike riders are killed because they ride in the wrong direction or on the sidewalk. A particularly lethal combination is riding the wrong way on the sidewalk. A turning car will never suspect you're coming. Avoiding these bad habits, most likely learned while riding around on trikes in suburbia as a child, will make you safer riding a bike than driving a car. On top of that, you must ride defensively. Just presume that the other drivers are out to kill you because they don't know any better. A 5-foot-tall teenager in her dad's super truck literally might not know any better because she can't see you over the side window. Try to get eye contact with other drivers. They will mainly be looking for other cars. If you have not established eye contact, you can safely presume that they have not seen you and that they will go right out in front of you. Be courteous to other drivers, and in turn, they will be courteous to you. In terms of taking lanes, remember the following 2 rules. 1. Ride with the cars, meaning you should be in the correct turn lane. 2. The faster you go relative to the speed limit, the more of the lane you should take. If you go 15 miles per hour and the speed limit is 15 miles per hour, you should be close to the middle of the lane. If you go 15 miles per hour and the speed limit is 55 miles per hour, you should be close to the edge of the lane. Once you go downhill and start pushing 40 miles per hour, you can start taking more lane. This automatically avoids you getting squeezed, and it puts you in the right position during turns at light crossings. Speaking of light crossings, a regular rider on a well-geared commuting or road bike, not a cruiser or a mountain bike, will easily be able to out-accelerate any car starting from a standstill when the green light changes. Trucks in particular won't be able to catch up until at least after 100 yards or so. A sedentary rider generally won't be able to do this. Doing so represents both a physiological challenge, a perceptive barrier, and to some extent a safety problem for beginners. Get off the bike and use the crosswalk if in doubt. Never ride across the crosswalk. It's illegal, dangerous, and annoying. Riding an underpowered bike, or more accurately, riding a bike underpowered, will decrease one's confidence as much as driving a significantly underpowered motorized vehicle. If it's cold, move faster or add a layer. Experienced people tend to start out underdressed, knowing exactly what their moving comfort level is. Comfort can be achieved by moving faster or slower. If it's warm, the problem becomes more difficult. It's very common to be air-conditioned to low heat tolerances. What happens is that air conditioning makes sweat glands ineffective, as they're never called into use. This means that when moving outside in the hot air, more blood has to be directed away from the core and the muscles to cool the body. If the skin becomes flushed when exposed to warm temperatures, that is a sign of air-conditioned sweat glands that have been rendered ineffective. This leaves less blood for the muscles. In effect, living with air conditioning is like exercising after eating a big meal, in which case the blood would be around your stomach area. This effect can be dramatic. For instance, people who are used to training hard but indoors in air-conditioned buildings run out of energy and oxygen very quickly if they have to repeat the feat outdoors in temperatures of 30 degrees Celsius, 86 degrees Fahrenheit, or higher, because their circulatory system simply isn't used to the extra load. The best type of bicycle for commuting is probably a touring bike, as it goes fast, far, and carries a load. The ideal frame is steel. Steel is durable, and unlike carbon, it doesn't fail catastrophically. If you're going to commute by bicycle, don't be afraid of spending a couple $1,000 or more on a bicycle. If you maintain it well, it will last you the rest of your life. After all, most people spend more on their cars, which generally only last about a decade. 6.6. Services. In a service economy, people pay other people to raise and teach their children, grow and cook their food, build and maintain their homes, make their clothes, although you still get to pick your own unless you hire a personal stylist, and so on. Mostly things that we could do ourselves. In return, we get to spend our time working at a job, doing the same thing most of the day. This arrangement follows from the economic law of comparative advantage, which is supposed to make everybody better off economically. There are, however, parts of life that are difficult to measure economically because there's no market for them. There is, for instance, no market that can price in the cost of happiness, yours and theirs, in not raising your own children. Worse, this arrangement fixes an identical price for everybody. This is great for the accountant who gets paid $100 per hour, allowing him to purchase lots of services with only 1 hour's pay, and bad for the hairdresser who gets paid $10 per hour. It would make financial sense for the hairdresser to serve himself for any kind of service that has a higher hourly wage than what he is paid. 6.6.1 TV, cell phones, and other money sinks. As mentioned earlier, many products have been turned into service arrangements, where a company will provide the hardware for free or at a loss-leading price in return for a contract buy-in. Such services like TV, phone connections, and so on are mutually substitutable goods, and it doesn't cost the company anything to keep you on the plan. They just rake in the money. If the cables are already in place and all that travels on them is information, more information isn't going to cost much energy. Companies therefore spend large amounts of money trying to tell you how their service is different, because it actually is not. This means that once a customer has been hooked, the companies will try hard to keep him on since the advertising costs are sunk. Thus, if you ever want to deal with the service company, simply ask to speak with their retention department to negotiate a better deal. Cell phones. Opinions are strongly divided. I have my opinion, everybody else seems to have a different one when it comes to cell phones. No less than a decade ago, people did just fine without them, yet cell phones have already turned into a need. Aside from providing an opportunity to share the most mundane details of one's life at all times, cell phones have created the opportunity to engage in activities without any prior planning whatsoever. Cell phones have provided a false sense of security and the ability to disregard precautions like bringing a map. If you're having trouble letting go, talk to an older person, one over 25, about how they used to get around without them. If you must have a cell phone, I suggest a pay-as-you-go plan. This should not cost more than $15 per month. Don't get suckered into contracts. The primary reason for having a cell phone isn't to call your friends and tell them you're on your way. It's to call 911 in case of an emergency. Cell phones have this capability without a contract. If you need to make a real phone call, say to your bank, use a VoIP phone service. Don't rely on VoIP for emergencies. It's not sufficiently reliable. Internet. I have many good things to say about the Internet. To the Renaissance man, the Internet is like a super advanced library or meeting place where it's easy to find like-minded people, as well as instructions for doing and making most things yourself. It's also a great way to waste a lot of time. These days, many websites, my own included, are full of advertising to pay for operating costs. However, it's also quite easy to avoid having to suffer the barrage of ads by using any one of the many ad blocker plugins. In many cases, this will substantially speed up the load times of a site, which means that one can go with slower connections than otherwise believed. In fact, switching off all images tends to work really well on text-dominated sites like newspapers and blogs. Go ahead, I won't mind. TV. I have nothing good to say about TV. While I can't prove its universal disutility, I think not having a TV, or at least not watching it, is a big factor when it comes to choosing unconventional paths. Naturally, there's this popular idea that TV feeds the masses with certain values, but I believe this is exaggerated. Most programming offers fairly reticent opinions and is quite free of actual content. The great beauty of TV is therefore not so much that it acts as a form of active propaganda, filling people with new ideas, but that it keeps people from having new ideas in the first place. When TV was invented, it was thought to be a great opportunity, a great teaching tool for quickly reaching the masses. However, ironically, it turned out that TV was much better at keeping people from learning. This fits perfectly with the focus on specialization. During the day, professionals attend to their jobs. During the evenings, they vegetate in front of their TVs, thereby prevented from learning anything, and this effectively keeps them in their jobs. Actually, the closer you get to middle-class values and neighborhoods, the greater the preponderance of silent streets. All you see in the evening are empty streets and a faint blue hue emanating from behind the curtains of every house. In my experience, by going cold turkey, it takes about a week to get rid of a TV addiction. There's no pain, save an empty spot in the room and perhaps the loss of hundreds of imaginary friends, mostly detectives, doctors, lawyers, and spaceship captains you have vicariously lived through, yet learned nothing about. If you still need your fix, you can swap, borrow, or rent DVDs and watch those instead. 6.6.2 Money, Credit, and Insurance. I'm not a big fan of automatizing personal finances. In my opinion, the only thing worse than automatic control is no control. The former is, however, a large improvement over the latter. The most important reason for this is that automatic procedures eventually fail. A missed automatic transfer due to some institution changing their procedures might result in cascading failure of everything linked to that account. When this happens, companies love to slap you with exorbitant fees. The systemic problem is forced complexity and tight coupling. You can't get rid of the forced complexity without giving up automatization. However, you can decouple by keeping a buffer amount in each account comparable to the maximum amount you have or will ever withdraw from the account. Keeping all these buffers has opportunity costs, but think of them as a cash reserve that could be used elsewhere if you cancel the automatic systems. Credit cards. Credit cards are mostly a non-issue in the Renaissance lifestyle. The rich may use credit, but the wealthy don't. Leave rewards, cashback, and frequent flyer miles to consumers and high spenders. If you never carry a balance, as nobody should, negotiating interest rates is irrelevant. If you spend less than $4,000 a year using the credit card, selecting the best card is a waste of time as far as I'm concerned. The only reason I have a credit card is to pay for things online with a modicum of protection against identity theft. Cashback is slightly worthwhile and comparable to the free float of the balance you run up. Suppose you spend $300 a month. Then 1% cashback will result in $36 a year. The $300 float can be invested at, say, 10% per year, which yields $30. Obviously, the $3,600 which is spent during this process is gone. Spending money to get rewards is never profitable. People in the U.S. have to deal with the secret formula, the so-called credit score, which attempts to evaluate their credit risk based on previous behavior with debt. I see no reason to engage in credit behavior based on superstitious beliefs about a formula which is secret. Credit scores are irrelevant because obtaining a loan is irrelevant. It's perfectly possible to save up enough money to buy a small home and buy it in cash, 100% down. To determine whether it is worthwhile, just compare your portfolio's return on investment to the cap rate of the real estate you're buying. The only case where credit scores may be important is in obtaining insurance or a job. If this concerns you, get a single card and pay the balance off in full every month. That is what I do. It doesn't result in the top scores, like those who have enough credit to go $50,000 in debt overnight based on a decade of regular payments on massive balances. On the other hand, it is not subprime either. Insurance. The way insurance works is that a company takes premiums from a pool of people and pays it out to those who have accidents and make claims. Actuaries are generally very good at estimating how accident-prone groups of people are, and the difference between take-in and payout, also known as the combined ratio, is generally low. Insurance companies thus make their money by holding your money, called the float, and investing it for their own profit. Since the insurance company is willing to take the bet in return for the proceeds from investing the float, it means that you should not take the bet unless your financial loss would be catastrophic, or you know better than the actuaries. Furthermore, you also have the opportunity to proactively reduce the risks. If you think about the potential consequences of everything you do, that is, careful, you can substantially reduce your risk. On the other hand, if you know your behavior is risky, paying for insurance might be worthwhile, unless the insurance company also knows this, in which case they will simply charge you more. Many insurance plans are better thought of as financing than insurance. This holds for insurance plans that pay for regular maintenance, such as health and dental. Here, the cost of the maintenance gets added to the premium along with a profit for the insurance company, similar to how a credit company collects interest. They would not offer these fully loaded plans unless it was unprofitable for you. Preventing catastrophic, that is, irrecoverable losses, is the only reason to carry insurance. Effectively, this means carrying as high a deductible as possible, while at the same time having enough funds, which you can invest, to cover losses up to that deductible. Oftentimes, people carry too much insurance simply because they don't have the money on hand to cover the deductible. This shouldn't be a problem for you, though, and so you'll profit. Another common argument is that the monthly premium is low. This is like saying that a stock is cheap because it trades for $3. This argument is common for renter's insurance. However, this is a case where it should be easy to have the funds to replace anything that was lost which can be bought. Furthermore, it saves the hassle of battling the insurance companies, which have a habit of routinely denying the first claim. Some insurances are not necessary. Once you're financially independent, you don't need unemployment insurance. You don't need life insurance, as your estate's assets can simply support another dependent. You don't need disability insurance, since you don't need to work to live. If you don't have a car, you don't need car insurance either. If you own your home outright, you don't need home mortgage holders insurance. If your home comprises a substantial part of your assets, which is not a good idea, you would want to carry some form of insurance, as a loss would be catastrophic insofar as you would not be able or willing to save up the money to buy a new one in a few years. Whether or not to insure should be a rational decision based on one's risk of loss and ability to survive the loss. Most of us don't insure our clothes or tools. For a financially independent person, this will extend much further since almost everything can be replaced many times over. 6.7. People. Voluntarily stepping out of the consumer cycle and saving enough to replace one's job with investment income instead of working isn't normal. The great majority of people do neither, and those who do one almost never do the other. Anyone not consuming as much as possible tends to do so out of external necessity, and thus doesn't have savings to invest. Anyone investing for income tends to have plenty of money and thus consumes at an average, if not above average level. There are few doing both, most do neither. To do both requires navigating the 4 types of people discussed in Chapter 3. As before, the types may overlap each other and should be thought of as archetypes. The popular consumer culture represents the dominant type. Being surrounded by this culture around the clock makes adopting its values almost unavoidable. Indeed, you may have to deal with your inner consumer from time to time questioning you. This culture measures success in terms of status symbols like things owned or number of visits to exotic places, awards, job titles, and so on. One's value is measured by salary. A marketing executive is more valuable than a school teacher, or what something costs. Often, new things are valued more than used things. Shrink wrap, in particular, significantly increases perceived value. But popular opinion is only rational from its own internal perspective, consuming for the sake of consumption. By choosing not to strive for these things, those who do will feel judged or be led to question their choices. This is largely their problem to deal with, but it will also turn into your problem, insofar as you have to deal with concerned inquiries about your material comfort level, or they're trying to rationalize their choices. As noted earlier, you may ask yourself questions like, can I really be comfortable with only one bathroom? Don't I deserve 2? Or, if I can't identify with a job title like assistant sales manager, who am I really? On the other hand, it is possible to find other people pursuing frugality or voluntary simplicity, as well as people interested in investing. If you prefer to avoid confrontation, keep a low profile when it comes to this area of your life. Don't mention that you also happen to manage a 6-figure portfolio to your voluntary simplicity friends, and don't mention that you only have 1 bedroom to your investment friends unless you're prepared for the resulting discussion. 6.7.1. Spouses and significant others. When writing and talking about this lifestyle, the most common lament I hear is that this would be a lot easier if I was single. Technically, this is not true. Due to economy of scale, 2 or more people working together towards homeotelik goals will always be better off than 2 people working separately. Today, society has reached a level of wealth that has made the economic benefit of living in a community or a tribe, and to some extent even a family, unnecessary. This is partly why there's a growing number of singles. The economic inefficiency of, for example, 2 people having twice as many refrigerators than a couple has become affordable. The main problem is therefore social. In fact, some people have told me outright that they could never live in a space as small as we do, currently 2 people in 289 square feet, because they can't stand being in the same room as the person they married for extended periods of time, or they can't deal with the idea of their children playing in the same room they're in. I'm not making this up. Material wealth has made it easy to avoid having to develop any social skills or flexibility. I think it's rare to find 2 people who agree on everything, and who stay that way. At least, that is what divorce statistics suggest. Fortunately, it's possible to reach a degree of compromise that allows one person to live this lifestyle and the other person to live a regular consumer lifestyle. To live together, a couple has to agree on certain things, like not signing up for debt, and how much to spend on common items like housing. A compromise must be reached. For other things, whereas it would be nice to agree on them, like where to squeeze a tube of toothpaste, whether to have a TV or a car, it's not a crucial issue. Unless you possess superior persuasive skills, it's no use arguing. Most people, and especially children, will follow your example rather than your suggestions, if they follow at all. Children will follow practically any example, and believe anything you tell them, so be careful there. But adults are calcified already and usually want to follow their own example rather than yours, unless it becomes clear that your way is better. This means you have to demonstrate that there is a viable, credible alternative. Once your spouse, or any other person you're trying to convince, is ready, he or she will generally come around very quickly. For instance, you may build up a savings account, or what people with bills, job dependents, and other liabilities call an emergency fund. It is very rare for someone not to see the sense in that. If your spouse is already familiar with the concept, start talking about how your emergency fund will support you for 5 years, say, and that you're thinking about switching careers or taking a long hiatus. A 5-year fund is in another category altogether. It is qualitatively different because it gives you many more opportunities in comparison to the mere breathing room a traditional emergency fund provides. A normal 6-month fund is only designed to pay your bills while you go and look for another job because you just got fired or carry you over while on an extended sick leave. Those who focus solely on these problems will have a hard time wrapping their heads around the larger time frame and additional possibilities. However, if your spouse's emergency fund is only the standard 6 months, but she is beginning to think that her current life path sucks, she'll most likely start saving more so that she'll have the same options. If your accounts are joint, say you would prefer to save the money whenever she proposes an additional expense. Suggest that you split some money into his and hers, and if he wants to buy something, fine, but you reserve the same amount of money for savings. After a while, you can start talking about the interest you're earning. One thing that tends to get people going is when I talk about how the money my savings generates on average corresponds to a full-time minimum wage job, and how that essentially means that the person is working for me. That seems to get people thinking, yes? If you want your spouse to adopt some change, another thing to try is to find something they are familiar with. For instance, my wife couldn't see herself living in a tiny house less than 150 square feet, my original plan, so I started talking about boats. Then a reader of my blog suggested living in a motorhome. Unlike me, my wife had actually been in a motorhome and lived in a mobile home park at some point, so she was familiar with those and was much less resistant to this idea. Had she not been, I guess one way would have been to start camping and make the trips longer and longer, after which I'd combine this with the suggestion that if we started camping full-time, we could cut our budget in half. Often it is merely a question of exploring all alternatives. You just never know. Try acquiring a majority of your stuff through swapping or free cycling. This might make your spouse reconsider the idea of paying for things, especially when he or she sees the envelopes arriving by mail, or when you come home with a leather jacket proudly announcing that you didn't pay for it, or that someone else is now using those roller skates that took up space in the closet. Get furniture used and make this your norm. Mention that this month your expenses were completely covered by income from your investment accounts. Volunteer for housework. The golden rule of volunteering is that the volunteer gets to do it his way. If you want to eat better for less, volunteer to cook. If you want to save money on cleaning supplies, start making them yourself. This takes leadership abilities, but if not you, then who? None of this guarantees success, but maybe, just maybe, someday your spouse will have a problem that is best solved using one of your solutions, and you'll be right there. 6.7.2 Children. Sometimes the question of children and how they factor into extreme early retirement comes up. We don't have children, so what follows are my purely theoretical thoughts on raising a child and how it would impact early retirement and the child. Most importantly, it should be realized that children don't spend a lot of money. Rather, their parents do. This means that raising a child costs as much as you can afford. It is certainly possible to clothe and feed a child for $100 per month, just like it is possible to clothe and feed an adult for that amount. Beyond this, all they need is love, learning, activity, and responsibilities. You can either pay for someone else to provide this, or you can provide it yourself. Most arguments will originate in the belief that it is normal, needed, or even desirable to pay someone else to provide these services. I believe that having a stay-at-home parent is a very good idea, and I don't think I'd want it otherwise. I had a stay-at-home parent myself. My mom stayed home full-time for the first 6 years of my life, And after we started going to school, she took a part-time job so we never came home to an empty house. This naturally goes very well with the idea of early retirement. Not only does financial independence and early retirement automatically allow for someone who stays at home, it doesn't delay the working spouse from early retirement in the sense that they don't have to provide for two people, since the retired adult is already providing investment income. This is also a good argument for achieving financial independence before having children. It only takes 5 years. I wouldn't send my children off to cello lessons, travel soccer, or preschool where they could pretend to be intellectually stimulated at a rate of $1,500 per month by learning a few words of Mandarin. I suspect children cost exactly as much as you're capable of spending. You can buy their clothes at thrift stores just like you buy your own, or you can buy designer outfits for them just as you buy designer outfits for yourself. Their entertainment can match your own. I don't believe in the necessity of everybody having their own room. Again, this comes down to social skills. Sharing used to be normal. Ask your parents or grandparents. There are certainly happy families on cruising boats where nobody has their own room. It can be done. Essentially, love and caring would be demonstrated through spending time together rather than spending money. I would make sure they did their homework. I would encourage inexpensive and creative hobbies. There would be chores in the form of housework, since everybody would contribute in their own way. I would certainly not try to fill their schedule with leadership activities and other brouhaha for their application to brand name university. I would make sure they did their homework, but I would let them make their own mistakes. I don't think I would pay an allowance, but I would hire them to do work not associated with the household. Whenever they got a money gift for their birthday or Christmas, or any income whatsoever, I would make them put 50% into savings and let them spend the other 50% as they wished. I would let them spend the interest of their savings account, hoping that they got the point. Once they understood the point of this exercise, the decision would be up to them. In the end, I would not be able to make the decision whether they should be salarymen, working men, businessmen, or Renaissance men. That would be up to them. Naturally, I'd also educate them on life skills that they don't get from school. They would know how to read a balance sheet, double dig a garden, put up a shelf, and fix a flat before turning 18. Again, the decision whether to spend money on this later on would be theirs. Speaking of school, I would concentrate on the early years, primary school, rather than the late years, trade school or college. Generalized skills, such as work discipline and the multiplication table, learned early, are far more important than a course in ancient Egyptian algebra, in my opinion. I would strongly encourage that they learn a trade, such as machinist, engineer, accountant, or nurse, before going for their education, by delving into English literature, history, political science, mathematics, and so on. This would make it possible to work their way through college and always have something to fall back on. I would probably not pay for a college education, but they would be free to stay at home until they finish. I'd recommend a state university and make them fully aware of the consequences of being in debt up to their eyeballs should they insist on a brand name college. In conclusion, I don't believe that adding members to our household would materially change the possibility, form, and implementation of financial independence.